I can make you live 20 years longer. You don't have to eat healthier. You don't have to exercise every day. You don't even have to meditate or anything like that. All you have to do is be born in Colorado. I've spent the last 10 years exploring the power of place and why region means so much for outcomes. Where you are born turns out to be one of the biggest factors for inequality in America, and it's become a matter of life and death. If you are born in certain parts of Colorado, like Aspen, you'll live to 87 on average. But if you're born in certain parts of South Dakota, like Pine Ridge, you'll live to 67 on average. Talk about inequality. And this trend is only getting worse. The US is now experiencing the greatest divide in life expectancy across regions in the last 40 years. We don't choose where we're born, and in most cases, we don't choose where we grow up. We cannot avoid inequality just like we cannot flatten the topography of America. But I'm here today to talk about the choices we can make to improve the lives of many. The answer is called opportunity mapping. Opportunity mapping helps struggling areas like Pine Ridge see where change is possible. When I first started exploring the power of place, I began by looking at income. I dug into those red regions in Mississippi and Georgia to figure out what was going on. But places are complex. They're more than just incomes and employment. They've got schools and hospitals and police and sewage, and so I knew there was a deeper story to uncover. I left my job at the Federal Reserve and I started research in grad school at MIT and Harvard. I began by looking across metrics, pulling together these massive data sets from large government agencies like the FBI, the CDC, and the EPA. What I saw in that data was that inequality in America wasn't just an income crisis, it was an interconnected crisis. David Pirtle knows these interconnections well. He grew up in Southern Illinois, but moved to DC where he got a nice apartment. Things started to go downhill for David, though, when his battle with mental issues progressed. When this happened, David lost his job, and when he lost his job, he lost his income and his ability to pay rent. In his late 20s, David became homeless in a city with one of the highest rates of homelessness in America. That winter, David slept outside in the shivering cold, thinking to himself, what if I don't wake up in the morning? What if I freeze to death? Does David have an income problem, an employment problem, a housing problem? Maybe it's about healthcare and mental illness. The answer is yes to all of these and more. It's an existential problem, and all of these questions point to the same answer, the difference between life and death. David was lucky, though, and he made his way to a shelter the next day. He now shares his story across the country. As heartbreaking as David's story is, it's not unique. The data shows it. Americans in these struggling regions, compared to their peers, have 3 times higher rates of mentally unhealthy days. They've got 20 times higher rates of teen pregnancy, 50 times higher rates of homes without internet. They've got 300-point lower credit scores, 1,000 times higher rates of incarceration, and they are more likely to die younger by up to 20 years. More likely to die younger. It's like running a race where you have to start hundreds of feet behind everybody else, kick off your shoes, and throw an extra 10 pounds in a backpack every single time you make it around the track. And what's worse is this race is even more challenging when we factor in race. Black Americans are 3 times more likely than white Americans to live in food deserts. They're 5 times more likely to be incarcerated, and they're 3 times more likely to live near toxic sites and die younger from pollution. More likely to die younger. This is the travesty of inequality. Inequality is not about how many bills you have in your pocket, it's about how many breaths you have on this planet. It's hard to think about how this data relates to our own lives. Where I live in Brooklyn, the life expectancy is 79. But I've now spent so much time in this data, I can't help but think about what it means not only for me, but for my family. There's only so much we can control, and the interconnections make it that much more complex. But I want to try and do everything I can in this work and beyond to push that number higher for myself and my loved ones. But what if we're looking at this wrong? What if it doesn't have to be this way? When we see a map like this, our eyes flash to the regions in red. But what if we flipped it? What if instead of fixating on the red, we learned from the blue? Let's borrow that program from Southwest Indiana that reduced violent crime. Let's use that legislation from New York that banned loan sharks and improved financial stability. We could use data to see similarities, uncover what was working, and translate that to struggling areas. We don't just need to look at why some are dying, we could look at why others are living. This is where opportunity mapping comes in. See, I took this idea and I launched a site, a data portal and analysis tool called American Inequality. See, American Inequality houses all of these opportunity maps so that way policymakers and businesses and politicians and change makers can not only see the biggest challenges in their communities, they can also identify solutions from other areas. Tens of thousands have viewed our work already, and it's making a world of difference. Policymakers in Oregon reached out to us in 2020 when the pandemic pushed everyone online. They knew qualitatively that they had an internet access issue, but they didn't know quantitatively where to direct their resources to close the digital divide. They used our data to identify struggling communities, and we borrowed a program from San Francisco that was working well, and we used it to deploy Wi-Fi hotspots to communities that needed it. In Texas, a legal nonprofit reached out to us after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. They used our data to see that along the southern border in Texas, women would now need to drive more than 400 miles to get an abortion, the precipice of injustice. They're now trying to extend legal services down there, which have worked well in other parts of the state, so that way women can get the legal support they need. We're incredibly excited about the opportunity mapping we've been able to do, but we know there's more work ahead. We've identified 3 steps to help go down that path forward today. First, collect better data on social issues. We can't change what we can't measure. Right now, almost all the data on social issues is presented at the state or the county level. But inequality happens in communities. If businesses or state or local governments can present more data at the zip code or the census block level, we can better pinpoint those problems and identify solutions. Second, put cash into communities. The biggest thing I have learned from the interconnected nature of inequality is that cash is king. A healthcare problem can quickly turn into a housing problem, which can quickly turn into an employment problem. But cash gives families the flexibility that they need to navigate those trying times. The Earned Income Tax Credit and Child Tax Credit do just this. They give cash directly to households, and households with children too. And the EITC and CTC have proven to be America's most successful poverty alleviation programs, transforming more red zones to blue than any other. And last, for each and every one of us here, take the Opportunity Mapping Challenge. The Opportunity Mapping Challenge asks all of us to share a story of inequality from your community. Share it with a friend, share it with that aunt or an uncle, and if you share it with us on our site, we will find the data and share it more broadly too. Because there's only so much that we or others can see, but this is how opportunity mapping works: perceiving problems and sharing solutions. Well, the secret's out. I can't really make you live 20 years longer. But the price of life and death is too high to wait another 20 years for change to come. Opportunity mapping can show us the way, but it's on each and every one of us to take that first step down the path. Our communities and our country will thank us, so let's take that first step today. Thank you.